Welcome to this Engine Knowledge Base video covering some of the general features in customizable reports. The intent is just to cover the basics that are common among the customizable reports for quotes, orders, invoices, and payments. Details on the specific reports can be found in other videos and user guides. Today we'll talk about the location of the customizable reports, the 5 main buttons in setting up a customizable report, and finally printing and saving the report. First, let's go over the location. These reports can be found under Projects, in the Reports menu, Customizable Quote Listing or Customizable Quote Listing line level, in the Quote section, both Quote Listing and Quote Listing line level, in the Order section, Customizable Order Listing and the line level equivalent, Invoices, Customizable Invoice Listing, and finally Payments, Customizable Payment Listing. First, the Selection button. When you press the Selection button, the first thing that opens is this Quote Selection Criteria window. The 4 different reports will have similar selection criteria, except it'll be modified for the specific transaction. For example, dates are now associated around a bid because it's a quote, and invoice will have dates associated around the development of the invoice. Across the top here, you have under the Basic tab, you have a list of criteria that you could search by. You got the project, which is basically the job name, and most of these you can use a wildcard or an asterisk. You got location and state, which comes from the General tab. Quote number, manufacturer quote number. Part number, again the wildcard could be used. Fixture type, external code, and file code. And the file code is the one on the General tab of the project. Create date is the original date that the project was created. It's an internal date within Oasis. The update date is the last date any user made a change in the project. The bid date is the date of the current bid. The original bid date is the first bid date of the quote. And return authorization date is the date for that. You can choose active or inactive, specified or non-specified. You can do spec jobs that have submitted a spec registration to a manufacturer. You can do only bid board quotes that are currently on the bid board. You can go by customer rank, quote status, and for these you can do multiple statuses if needed, whether it has a submittal, and if it's a daily quote, simple quote, or project bid. Under the Money tab, you can see you can put in different criteria for the different pricing schemes, sales, level 1, level 2, level 3, and you can do min and max, as well as you can do earnings. Internal allows you to control what internal criteria is on this quote. For example, the quoter or your sales account. These are mainly people or organizations within your business. Parties tab are those that are outside of your business. For example, the manufacturers or the parent manufacturer, customers, contracts, and reps, and the like. You can do specifiers as well as specifier roles. You can go by notes. Again, wildcards can be used. You can search by certain data that's in the attachment section. And finally, you can search by search keys. I don't have any search keys loaded, but if you developed your own custom search keys for your individual database, they would show up here and you can search by them. When you press OK, in this case I'm just canceling, but when you press OK, what will happen is the current selection that you have chosen will show up here. It'll be summarized. For example, the default in this case was the bid date for this month and this month, as well as these 3 quote statuses. And then it'll give you an approximate number of records that meet this criteria. This lets you know if you're at least in the ballpark time frame or that you have the right selection in place to capture the transactions that you need to. Now let's go over grouping. Grouping allows you to place different transactions together that are of a common theme. When you press the grouping button, it opens up the grouping definition dialog box. As you can see on the right, there are many fields that you can group by. These change based on the type of transaction. For example, these are for quotes, but invoices would have a different listing. And you can take any of these fields, I'm going to use manufacturer for an example, and bring it over, and it'll show up on the left side. As you saw, you can drag and drop it over, or you can click the add button. I'll just click another one there and click add. Any on this side that you need to remove, you can either drag it back or you can select it and remove it. You can also move them up and down by selecting them and either dragging them and moving them to a new order, or you can select it and click the move up or move down button as needed. As you can see here, manufacturer list has adjust values checked. Adjust values allows you to limit the values, the dollar values that will show up on this report based on this grouping criteria. In this example, this line on the report is going to show the values that are on those transactions that just apply to this manufacturer. If this was unchecked, the values on this manufacturer will reflect the total on that quote. But you may not want to have that because another manufacturer could be on that quote and that total will be listed again later in the report. So this allows you to list just this manufacturer's specific criteria. Same thing if you did by customer. There we go, customer name. You could adjust values by this. Again, if you have the adjust values checked, which is in most cases what you'll want, it will limit each time this customer is listed, it'll show just that portion for that customer. Finally, you can do a page break where each level of your grouping can be broken down onto a different page if that is desired. When you click OK, it will list right here what your current selection are. In this case, I listed manufacturers and I have adjust values. Now we'll move on to sorting. To sort, simply you click the sort button. What this will do is bring in a dialog box that lists all the fields that you can use for sorting. It works very similar to the grouping criteria. You can drag left or right. You can click add or remove as needed. In this case, I'm going to use manufacturer. You can add multiple levels of sorting and you can change the order. You can sort by ascending or descending. When you are done with your sorting criteria and you click OK, it's going to list right here all the criteria that you used for sorting. Next, we'll cover filtering. When filtering, you'll press the filter button. It works a little differently in that you'll get a dialog box that lists the values that you can filter by. And these will be dependent on what you entered into the grouping section of this report builder. So in this case, I have manufacturer selected, so it's going to give me the option to filter by certain manufacturers. When I select it, it's going to pull up a dialog that allows me to choose which manufacturer I'd like to filter by, and you can click more than one if needed. To remove it, you just select it and click remove. Why would you need to filter when you've already done a selection? Well, the reason why this is added is because when you do a selection, it will pull in transactions that meet your criteria. If I had placed Amanda's Test Manufacturer in the selection section, it would have pulled all quotes in this case that have Amanda's Test Manufacturer in the manufacturer field. But let's say there's multiple manufacturers on those quotes. When in the selection section, it will just pull in those transactions and then give you all the data that are based on those transactions. But if I want to further filter it down and get rid of those manufacturers that are not Amanda's Test Manufacturers but are still on those transactions, I can enter on the filter section here what I want to specifically show on the report. In other words, do I want to show transactions that have a certain manufacturer but list all the manufacturers that are with that person or that transaction? Or do I want to list just the specific manufacturer I'm after? And this filter allows you to do that. When you click OK, Just like on all the others, it will list in the current selection what you have chosen to filter by. Next, we're going to cover how to control the layout of your report. These customizable reports allow you to choose different transactions, then group, sorter, and filter them. Once you have what you want to show, now you can use the layout button to choose how you want to show it. When you click the layout button, it brings the report layout dialog box. On the right side, it lists all the fields that can be included in the report. As you can see, there are quite a few. These fields will change based on the type of transaction. In this case, these are the fields that are available for quote transactions. On the left side, you'll see some of the default settings until you change them of what are typically in the quote reports under columns, and then what's typically in quote reports under their own row. At the top left, you'll see that you can change to portrait, landscape, or legal. Next to that, it'll tell you how many columns basically you can use. In this case, portrait has 558 columns, and based on the fields you have chosen here, you've used up 495, giving you available 59. If you go over, it'll turn red, and it'll tell you where you've gone over down here. That just means those items are going to go off the page. You can either adjust what you're showing, or you can change the landscape, and you can see you have more room. Just like on the other sections, you can drag and drop or click add or remove, and you can move up or down by dragging or use the move up or down buttons. As you can see, there's numbers here next to each field, and that tells you the width. Let's say you find that you have a lot of project names that are very long. You might choose to extend the width of that. In this case, I've extended it to 135, and the total used will adjust accordingly. If you push something off the edge of the paper, it will turn red. The opposite is true. If you find that a field is using too many characters and you don't really have that many characters in there, you can use it as a technique to reduce the number to fit more items on the report. The same works for down here under the row, except this is now a field width instead of a column width. The difference between these two sections are columns are items that are displayed, if you think about it like an Excel spreadsheet. You have the fields listed across the top, and down the side it'll be based on your groupings and other criteria that you list here on the layout. It's going to show you what all you want on the report, and it's going to read across like a table or an Excel spreadsheet. Below each row of columns, you could add an additional row to list items that are larger in nature. In this case, a manufacturer list, it could list multiple manufacturers separated by a comma on this report, and it wouldn't necessarily fit in an individual column, so you would set it on their own row. You can have multiple items on here. In this case, I've listed these three. These three are going to be listed on one row. It's going to list manufacturers for 146, then start with active for 92 and bid name for 140. Let's say that you want to put an item on its own row by itself. You could drag this row break down, and what that'll do is now list manufacturer, list, and active on one row, skip a line, give you the bid name, and on the very next line start over with the next session of columns. When you're done developing your report layout, you can press OK, and it's going to list here all the items that you chose. The first part will list all the items that are in column, and the next will show how many items you displayed in their own rows. Brackets will denote which ones are separated within their own row or by themselves. And you'll list the report orientation. In this case, I've chosen landscape. Finally, we'll get into printing and saving the report. When you are ready to print your report, we recommend that you output to print preview, and this will allow you to see what you have on the report before you save it and make sure it meets the criteria. When you select print preview, you can choose the print button down here or up at top, or you can hit file print. In this case, I didn't have any criteria in there, so it's a blank report. So once you choose what you want, then you can either print it from here or close it, and go and choose whatever you want to do, either print or save it officially. You can also print to your printer directly, print to PDF, print to Excel, send it via message, or send it via message as Excel. You can give it a name, and when you press save, it's going to save this report by this name so that you can come back and edit it later. Where it saves it, if you hit, and oh, by the way, you can press this to save as well. When you do press save, it will now show up in this section as a report that you have saved. This concludes the Engine Knowledge Base video on generic customizable report features. Please see other user guides and videos for further details.